Once again, Great Britain is Europe's problem child. The Delta variant is causing the corona numbers to rise. And Boris Johnson? Critics say the Prime Minister wants to pour fuel on the fire again. Careful but irrevocable. That is the motto of the British Prime Minister for the way out of the pandemic. For a long time, Boris Johnson's slogan sounded like a success model. Over the months, the number of corona cases in the United Kingdom fell rapidly. But there was still a lot of time between the individual easing steps. The people had a perspective and largely went with them. For weeks the incidence was around 20 and the British thought they had finally made it after a long, hard winter. But then Delta came along. The highly contagious variant, most likely brought into the country by travelers returning from India, caused the number of cases to skyrocket within a very short time. For months the British incidence was far below the German one. Now it is worlds in between. In Great Britain it has reached over 200 again, and thus at the highest level in all of Europe. So, time to pull the emergency brake again? This rather obvious idea seems to be further away than ever in the government district of London. Instead, 60,000 fans are allowed to go to the semi-finals and the final of the European Football Championship without any significant gaps in Wembley Stadium, and further easing is planned. So, even more oil for the blazing fire, as critics say. From July 19th, according to the current plan, the English can sit in the packed theatre again, celebrate huge parties, and even dance the night away in a packed club. Even the lifting of the mask requirement is up for debate. It's a terrible plan, tweeted Christina Pagel from University College London, who is also on a government advisory body. It looks like we are the only country that throws everything against the wall of vaccines and hopes that it will withstand, said the expert in another tweet. It should be noted that the wall of vaccines in the UK is much more stable than in many other countries. A good 63% of British adults are already fully vaccinated, and around 86% have at least the first dose behind them. Nevertheless, there are enough people left for whom Delta is a danger, especially since really effective protection against the variant should only exist after the full vaccination. It should be borne in mind that the number of hospital admissions and deaths has not yet increased to the same extent with positive cases as in previous corona waves. But last week, the hospitals in England were faced with as many corona cases as they had not for a long time. The government's calculation is nevertheless, younger people and children are less likely to end up in hospital with COVID-19 or die from it. The fact that some of them also have to struggle with long-term consequences, and I can really tell you what that means, and that high numbers of infections leave room for new, even more dangerous mutations of the virus, is ignored. Even doctor and public health expert Azim Majid would prefer not to loosen up further on the situation. I would wait a few more weeks, said Majid to the German press agency. Then the vaccination campaign has progressed even further, and one can see more clearly how many severe causes can really be prevented. Especially with measures such as distance or masks, it makes sense to keep them indoors. Wearing a mask doesn't hurt anyone. You should keep doing that until autumn, says Majid. The fact that Boris Johnson now insists on sticking to the July date after a slight postponement of his so-called Day of Freedom, or Freedom Day, which was initially planned for June 21st, has a lot to do with expectation management. He has been emphasizing for months that the relaxation of dates, not appointments, should be made. At the same time, by namely possible dates, he stirs up so much hope in his people that it is difficult to row back. It's a completely different rhetoric than in Germany, for example, where the Delta variant has been anticipating increasing numbers for weeks and is not ruling out a tightening of the restrictions. Even if everyone can hope for it, there is no talk of a one-way street to freedom, as Boris Johnson never tires of calling out. This makes it easy for lobby groups to rail against politics whenever they hesitate and to threaten impatient backbenchers with disloyalty. I think it's a mistake to say that this is a one-way street, said expert Majid. No one could foresee which variants or developments would come up and whether restrictions would be necessary again. On her farewell tour in England on Friday, Chancellor Angela Merkel left no doubt that she is also not a big fan of Boris Johnson's game of risk. The British government will make its decision, she said during her visit to his country estate in Chequers. But I'm worried and skeptical whether that's a good thing, and not just a little bit. And I'll see you in my next video. Auf Wiedersehen.